start with the panel discussion. We're running a little bit late, but they've all been given about 10 minutes to talk, so we'll kind of get us all back on time. So depending on how much time everybody talks, that will dictate how much time for questions and answers we have in between people. Without further ado, I'm going to give you Sarah Leupen from Biological Sciences, and she's going to talk about some of the really cool things she's done with her nutrition class.
Okay. All right, so I'm Sarah Leupen, and I teach various things in biology, anatomy, physiology, nutrition, neuroscience, cool stuff like that. And so you mentioned so one of the things I do that I'm happy to talk to anybody about anytime also is this teaching technique called team-based learning in my anatomy and physiology course, which involves no lecturing whatsoever. And they have the same content, we have the same content goals as the other instructor, or I would have for my own course if I were lecturing. So if you talked about that sort of thing this morning, you don't have to give up on content when you give up on talking. But the main course I want to talk about is nutrition, where I'm not doing that. We do a mix of things in nutrition, including some lecturing. About 15 or 20% of the time is me lecturing. Right now, that might change. Last year I came to the afternoon workshop of this thing, the hybrid thing, and I can, if anybody wants to know why I would want to do a hybrid thing, we can talk about that later too. But since we only have 10 minutes, I want to explain what I actually did to hybridize my nutrition course. So, nutrition in the year is taken by, in the normal fall semester, is taken by pre-nursing students mostly. It's required for them. And so I can have certain goals that are very targeted to their future profession, and I do. And then in the summer, which is when I originally did this as a hybrid, and then I did it again this past fall. But in the summer, which is the course I was planning when I did this, I knew that a lot of people in the course would be working professionals who were trying to get this criterion to go back to nursing school, to get into nursing school, essentially, after having already gotten an undergraduate degree. So most people in that class already had a BA or a BS, and they were coming back and taking it. So that group of people, it was especially important to hybridize because most of them were working during the class. It was useful for them to have fewer hours to meet. Summer class meets a lot, so that only meet for shorter periods of time during the week allowed them some more flexibility as well. Many of them had families and so on. So anyway, so what did I do? Well, I looked at the course goals. I guess this morning probably you were talking about making goals and talked about backward design, right? Did you guys do this morning? Yeah. So I already did backward design, I think, although there's always improvement there. But so what I did was I looked at my course goals, and especially I looked at the goals that I thought hadn't been done that well the first time. So I had my course goals already in my syllabus, but one of the goals that I hadn't, I don't think, done that successfully before I hybridized it was giving students practice with giving nutrition advice. So these people are all going to be nurses. And it's good if they know about nutrition for themselves and they get all the B12 they need and whatever, but mostly I need them to be able to take real people who often are in a whole different situation than they are in terms of nutritional knowledge, economic situation, everything, and be able to give them appropriate advice. So that's one of the things I wanted to do with my hybridization. And a concern that I had was that with less class going on, there would be fewer words coming out of my mouth, and the students would become anxious that they didn't know what to focus on in terms of course content without me talking at them all the time. So I did two major things, both of which I'll just show you real quick here. So on my Blackboard site, for every chapter that's in the book that we did, I made a little video over. Are we internet connected, Karen? John? All right. So I made a little 5-minute overview using Jing, which is a free downloadable program. And we don't seem to have volume. It's probably my own problem here. There we go. Digestion is breaking down. So just for 5 minutes, I loaded up the. Your publisher can, if you buy a book, your publisher can give you access to the electronic version of the book, and then you can flip through it electronically while you talk. Right now I'm just sitting here on the front page, but eventually I get to other pages here. and I sort of say, look at this figure, you know, read this, skip that, and so on. It gives them a good, let's see if I can skip it. So, yeah.
Figure 3.2 on page 109.
So look at
gives an overview of the
So I just flip through the book and give them some idea. And I wasn't sure whether they watched this, and so I asked them anonymously, and they don't all watch it, but a heck of a lot of them watch it. I think they'll watch anything, people. They won't read anything, but they'll watch anything. So, today's students. But, so more of them watched it than I thought. And it was for the reason I thought, at least the ones who volunteered, I didn't ask them to free respond about it, but to basically give them an idea of how to approach the chapter, which they essentially, you know, had to read on their own, because a lot of the content that I wanted them to get wasn't stuff we did in class. I saved the stuff we did in class for the hard, interesting, complex, difficult, messy stuff, and all the stuff like, you know, name the 12 vitamins, whatever. Why do I need to say that? They can read that in a book. So that they did themselves. So that's one of the things I did that sort of took some content out of class, took some of what I would normally say out of class, and I also used that to resolve a concern that you brought up earlier. I couldn't tell I was sitting in the back. And you said, well, gosh, you know, I don't want to replace, you know, there's no book I could find that would say exactly what I would say about this. And so what I did is sometimes in there, and so even in this book, there are things it says that make me crazy, right? Any book what does. And so I would say in my video, like, ignore this is terrible, and move on to this, and this is what you should really think about this, and so on. So I was able to get in a little more of my editorializing in there as well, which allowed me to give up on some of the straight content lecturing. And then the other thing I did was to give them that chance to do that nutrition advice. Oops, wrong one. And the way I did it was that, so students in this course have to record their diet for 3 days and then enter it into a diet analysis program. And then you end up with this PDF of, you know, what foods you ate that contained vitamin B6 and how many calories of saturated fat you ate and all this business. So that's the whole bit. So they posted, so in these groups, which Blackboard made randomly, they had to post their dietary analyses, which is here. And then they had to give each other nutrition advice. So they would read, uh-oh, I don't have privilege.
That's because I'm logged in. So control panel and just add me. Sorry, you're going to have to go back to your class. Here, I'll do it.
Okay. So when they
keep
would
talking and I'll enroll as an instructor.
So I have this assignment with a specific rubric, so what they're supposed to say, so how they're supposed to give each other advice, because otherwise it's terrible, right? And the thing is that giving good advice, as you might have learned in your life as well, is actually very difficult. Just knowing what the person should do is really about 10% of it, right? And then there's sort of how to present that information to them. And I also didn't want the kids to say the people to say things like, well, you should eat more vitamin B12. Well, nobody knows what is, you know, where's that from? So you can say, well, you know, and there are other things like you shouldn't really tell people to stop eating something. You should tell them, what if you ate less of this by replacing some of it with this, you know? Basically stating it in a positive manner and so on. So I gave them, if you want to pull up a group, my idea of what I thought was good nutrition advice and worked that into my rubric. And is this going to work now? Come on, fingers. Okay, so then each person had to give advice to the other 3 people in their group, and then each unit of dietary advice had to meet, you know, each of those sets of dietary advice had to meet that criteria. So one of the things I said, I just picked this randomly, but I can see that John gave advice to Pooja, and you know, you're getting an excellent amount of protein, you're pretty close to getting. So I told him to start out with something positive. You know, it's like we're supposed to do when we read students' papers. You know, you're supposed to say, well, it looks like you had a good idea about Kant, but the rest of it is really, you know, but you start out with something good, and that's what I told them to do too. And then, you know, I noticed that you enjoy brownies. Consider adding nuts into them. So he doesn't say stop eating brownies. So, you don't need to give nutrition advice. That's not my role here today. But the point is that I gave them these specific criteria. They had to work it in, and they practiced. And then at the end of the semester, the student receiving, so Pooja has to read all her advice and integrate that into a plan to eat over a period of 3 days, and then record that again, and then see how that changes all her dietary results and so on. So this is the kind of thing that works better online than it would have in class, because the students can think about it, look stuff up, and so on. It was also impossible to make it anonymous, so this person's name might have been Pooja, but it might have just been, I was allowed to code it so they could be anonymous, so no one would know who it was, who actually ate 3 cups of ice cream every night for 3 nights or whatever. It was anonymizable in a way it wouldn't be if they were sitting in a group in class giving each other advice as well. So that worked really well, actually. They really liked it. I think it did give them some practice with that goal. So that's a couple of things I've done in terms of moving goal achievement online to allow us to focus in class on some other goals. And to use class time for things like tests and things like that as well, since I don't have mine on. John?
Can you just talk a little bit about what you did for the coding? How did you handle the coding for now?
For this?
Yes.
Well, I can't remember now. I went through this, I think Karen helped me with this, somebody helped me with this, where I went through, when they posted their file, so when Pooja, whoever that is, posted her file, it could say, and some people said things like Superwoman, Mighty Mouse, whatever, somebody else's name beyond their own on it. So she could have written, if my name is Sarah, I could have said, well, I'm going to call myself Pooja for this and post this. And so John is posting advice to Pooja. Whoever Pooja's real name is, she knows what fake name she used, so she can access that on there. So, I thought there was another issue, I can't remember now, within the discussion board. I thought there was another issue because you can see who posted.
You can post
You can
anonymous.
post anonymously.
Maybe that is what they did. Yeah, some of them did anyway. The vast majority of them were like, well, I don't
So they
care.
can post, you can set it up to post anonymously,
Yeah.
and they can post their file, as long as they didn't post anonymously and then include their name.
There were
not
only a few
necessarily,
people, there were people who do that, no one in this group, that's right. There were people who did that because, when I brought it up, the vast majority of them were shockingly unconcerned with other people seeing how much fast food they ate or whatever. It was nice. It's a sharing generation. Yeah. So, and I used 12 minutes, sorry.
Well, thanks, Sarah. Does anybody have any general questions at the end? We'll hang around for a few minutes, I guess. Yeah. Chris?
Just a drought. So, I'm Chris Swan. I've hybridized, I've hybridized one course, and Karen hybridized another, which I also teach. And so I guess and I've been doing I've hybridized two courses. And
Plus Science 100.
and I've worked with Science 100, which I continue to teach during the summer and winter. And I've been doing that. I've been doing the hybrid thing since we started doing hybrid things at UMBC.
06.
06.
Yep.
Would have been similar.
So I guess the one thing that I would like to know, so I've reflected on this quite a bit because I took some research. I was on sabbatical and took some time away from teaching, and I came back to teach this past fall and stood in front of the classroom and became sort of disgusted with and bored with the way that I was teaching, and I've given some serious thought to what I was doing. And so, why are you all interested in hybridizing anything? I'm just curious why you want to do it.
Well, I'll answer your question, Chris. You know me. Because I actually don't think what I'm doing is as effective as I can be. I've been doing it for a long time and watching it change over time. There's got to be a better way to do things. And I deal with a lot of technology, so I really believe there's a better way to deliver it to it.
And so why hybrid?
Because that's the obvious thing that's available to me right now. There may be other things that I would do completely different as far as going. Are you saying move just away from lecture or going completely online? Because I'm not sure what other options there are. Maybe a little.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to change how we teach. I mean, there are books written on it. And so I'm just curious why. Right, so if I were to go back and take a look at how we were hybridizing in the beginning, I mean, the first thing we did was like, oh, it's less time in the classroom. Right, so we were saving our time face to face.
Well, saving the face-to-face
In
time.
the beginning, it was saving face-to-face time. I mean, so I was going to structure how I was going to discuss this. Was that in the beginning? So why were we hybridizing? The first thing was that we had a constraint in summer and winter session on time, and so the solution was, well, let's lift the face-to-face stuff out of the classroom and put it online somehow. Okay, and so what were we doing? The first thing that we were doing was, at least when I designed 220. Was say, okay, we got to take that material and deliver it some other way, and that doesn't work, right? You can't just take lectures and just give it to them. Just like we just heard, they'll listen to things all day long. But if you think about how students learn, students will sit there and listen, see things and hear things, but it goes right into short-term memory. We know this now, but it doesn't go into long-term memory. And so whether you're sitting there and talking at them, or you're sitting there and they're just looking at it, I mean, the hybrid thing it fails in that regard if you deliver the material that way. You've got to get them to engage some other way. And where I think Science 100 has been successful, I'm teaching it right now, is that the information comes at them in lots of different diverse ways. And they have to engage it and then reorganize it for themselves, repackage it. We know now, we're learning that STEM disciplines, that's one way. If we package it for them and deliver to them, that's hard for them to learn. But if they have to package it themselves, information, by making them go do things via the hybrid format, like going and looking at a video and actually having to do something. If they can do that asynchronously, then that's an effective. So then the question is, what do you hybridize? And then, does that meet the goals of the course? And so, what I would suggest is, and I don't know what's been going on today, or what's going to be going on this afternoon, is that when I started doing this, it was literally take what's in the classroom and lift it out and make it available online, and that doesn't work. That's a ton of planning, and when I was looking elsewhere for advice, matching up goals with, matching up your learning goals with what it is to hybridize.
Can you talk a little? Are you going to talk about like your experiences with ecology?
Yeah, that was the next thing. And so when I taught ecology, I did exactly that.
Maybe give some context so they understand what ecology.
Okay, so I'm a biologist in a sort of in the environmental science part of the geography and environmental systems program. And so I took a course in ecology, which is a straight lecture course, and tried to make it a hybrid, which meant that I gave them a textbook where they had to do a ton of reading, and I gave them online quizzes. I gave them lecture material that they had to digest, and gave them online quizzes, and gave them heavy lectures once a week, okay, and exercises to do outside of class. And it didn't work. What happened was, and I had some discussions with Karen is that, well, if you're doing all this stuff offline, why don't you take class time to do something? And I think that what I'm going to do next time is I found on reflection with that, I found a textbook that has got actually active learning in it. So there's now a completely online textbook. It's not online. It's Symbio makes a textbook that's got an active component with it, where it's more like a workbook instead of a textbook. And
Computer simulation.
it's simulations. There are workbooks that they do, and I actually used that as my textbook this year. And I got pretty good feedback on the textbook. And then since it's a 70-person class, I'm actually not going to make it well, I guess I could call it a hybrid course. It's not going to save me any time, but I'm going to split the 70 people in half and have only half of them meet once a week. And actually do something completely different in class. I'll give them the lecture outlines, the lecture material online and say, here you go. Assess them on it online with quizzes and do something different in the class. I don't know if I'll call it a hybrid class, but I'll just say you have lots of homework. And do group activities or take them outside or do something. Ecology is the study of the interaction between organisms and organisms in the environment. So on nice days we'll go out and
You're only going to do that with half the class?
well, I'll do it half the class one day, the other half the class the other day.
I thought you were trying to set up an experiment.
No. So that's how I think I'm going to handle it. So what that'll do is actually end up, so the question then returned to is, so why do that? Well, the material then will be made available to them. You know, how will I make them organize that material? Well, it'll be delivered to them, but then they're going to actually have to digest it on their own online, and then organize it and deliver it to me online. And then what we'll do is something else in class, so that I don't have to stand there and talk at them at 8:30 in the morning and watch them be bored to death, which is what happened this past fall, which is why.
What about maybe describe, you and I had conversations about the student feedback to you this semester when you taught it hybrid the first time. So I think you might have gotten stuck a little bit in one of the ruts that we talked about earlier about giving them all this reading and then you'd go into lecture and then end up kind of going through some of it again, or the students had just said,
Why do I have to be
yeah, why do I even have to show up? The stuff you put online is so good. Why do we have to come see you?
Well, I don't know what else to say. She just said it. I mean, it's essentially what happened was, what was that is, it was, I tried it the first time and it just sucked. Work. So what to do next was that it wasn't.
And you toyed with, should I put the whole thing online? But, why not?
Why not to put it all on? I can't remember the essence of this conversation. It was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And he's trying to forget it.
No, I mean, there was some discussion earlier just about curricular, problems in a department if you've got a bunch of different students or just curricular issues, different levels. But this is a core class for a chunk of students in the department, and there's something, for ecologists, there's something just sort of aesthetically displeasing to putting ecology online. There should be the face-to-face component or the outside component or the
Well,
the
so to me,
interaction.
it's, this is not a deposit information. So there's certain types of courses where you're just picking up information out of my brain and sticking it into their brain. There's a certain amount of that, like if you talk about biomes, it's like they should be able to go out and understand why, that if they go to the Patapsco or wherever you're always going to see, the same 5 species of trees sitting next to each other. And if they go to, in and around like Michigan, they should always see the same 10 species of trees. There are those patterns that they're going to always see. And those are the boring lectures. I don't like sitting there talking about that. That's rote memorization. They have to do. But at the same time, there are mechanisms that generate those types of patterns. And they need to understand what those mechanisms are. And I can explain what those mechanisms are. And it's going to be, there needs to be some sort of interaction. And standing in front of the class and walking around the room and trying to get them to figure that out, there's a place in the classroom for that. There's no place for that. And that's where the hybrid is.
Are you still doing the discussion board portfolio?
I don't like that. I don't like that for 2 reasons. First of all, it's a pain to grade. And the other is that it seems so obligatory that it was like, when I was starting to watch some news, it was like, they were just like saying stuff just for the sake of saying. And when I started to look at it and really see what they were doing, I didn't think they were discussing. And so what I started to do, I'm sorry to sound so a little bit downer on it, but what I started to do was say that, all right, go and research a topic. So you know what one thing that I did find that was fun? So we studied the interaction between species. Like, go find the grossest parasite you can find and let's have a contest. You know? So they would go find pictures of parasites. And so they would send me pictures. And we'd have like a slideshow of parasitism. And so, you know, describe to me what kind of parasitism you're talking about, and we would page through those
8:30
online.
in the morning?
I don't know what they're doing or when they're doing it, but we would go and during class, and so instead of me giving them, you know, the lecture on parasitism, they would go find this stuff, and then I would page through them like, okay, so you know where this, you know, what part of the world is this parasite? You know, is this an obligatory parasite? Is this a parasite or a parasitoid? And then we would talk about the life history of the parasite. Or predation. You know, go find some really neat, you know, examples. And of course, they get a kick out of it because it's super violent, you know, typical kid type stuff. You know, and then we would talk about, you know, so I would have them, first of all, they would engage in some kind of material outside, and then what would happen is they would start engaging with each other a little bit in the classroom. And so I found other ways to get them to engage as opposed to this. I just didn't like this.
Were you using the rubric with the quote bubble?
Yeah, but I did. Oh yeah. I would use. Didn't like it. Maybe I got bored. Maybe it was working. I just didn't like it.
What do you like, Chris?
What was that?
What do you like?
What do I like?
Yeah. Gross bugs.
3 dishes of ice cream at night.
I like camera on. I like Yingling in the can. Like the Steelers. Make sure you get that.
Next season.
Next season, baby. But one thing I like about Science 100 is that what we've really started to do is start to branch out into different types of things to get the students engaged in a lot of contemporary issues that are relevant to them. So go watch this video and write up what you think. There's no right or wrong. You know, it's just what do you think? And do you do something substantive? It doesn't matter that much to their grades, but they're doing something. And they can't do that in class. They can't tell me what they think about a video or go find a video that's relevant to this topic. You know, we end up with learning something too, or post a video that's relevant. They're going and doing stuff. And they actually think that, I mean, what do they do all day? I mean, they're searching. That's that. I like that. So there you go. That's what, yeah.
Christy, you've done this course, the Science 100, in this format in the regular semester as well as the summer?
That's not fun. I only do summer. That's not mine. I do it for two reasons.
My son took it in the summer and thought it was a great course, and he worked really hard, like all the time, but really liked it.
And they learn.
They get a semester's worth of stuff in 4
Oh,
weeks.
yeah.
They learn it. I mean, you're talking about non-majors learning natural selection in 2 days. I mean, it's unbelievable how much. It's very, as a scientist, teaching non-majors, it's very, very fulfilling. I can tell you. I'm not sure that has any, if I can just say that. Watching them get material. It's they don't complain. There's no complaining.
Which students did you have?
There's no complaining.
Well, the complainers come in fall and summer. Fall
He
and
starts
winter.
off with, there's no complaining
Yeah,
in class.
exactly.
Well, I start off the class with, I want to see you fail.
So I'm going to try to keep us on task again. So we'll switch and hear from Katie.
I'll answer Chris's question, and I think Joe did it because I actually started hybridizing, I think, the year after Chris did, in the social work department, and I did Social Work 240, which is information technology and social work. And similar to what Joe was saying is I'm doing it because I'm wondering how am I connecting with students, and I think Sarah mentioned it too. You show anything via video and they'll watch it. You give them a book and you're lucky if 5 students read it. So, you know, I think that was kind of some of the drive too, is how am I connecting with them. I had some of kind of the similar struggles. I've taught this course last 3 winters. Last year I was a little crazy. I taught 2 sections in the fall and 3 in the spring, both in hybrid and online. So I have done kind of the fall, winter, spring. I have not done summer. Winter is probably the hardest. You have, 21 days to get across a lot of content. And then as the instructor, you have to turn around and start your spring semester, which is probably the hardest part of teaching. So I think there's a lot to cover when you are working to kind of compact your courses into winter and summer. It's certainly, I just came from teaching it in the fall, and then I'm looking at collapsing basically, 2 weeks into each class period, and I have maybe 6 class periods kind of over the class time there, or the semester, the winter semester. So it is a lot to do, but I think the students are willing to do it because they perceive online as being easy, and I think that's one thing that's kind of a myth that we need to be cautious of. So I've set up a couple of things which I'll talk about. I think students kind of think that the online and hybrid courses are easier to do. And it's not that they are hard, it's just you have to be a responsible student. And I think that's what the online and the hybrid class really does, is it kind of puts the onus on them. That, and you kind of do that in class, but a little bit more so online. You put up the class material, especially when you're completely online. You put up the class material, and if you aren't following along, 3 weeks from now, you're pretty much in a hole, or you failed the class if it's a winter session. And, I've seen students kind of do that. So I've set up a couple mechanisms so students can see where they're at and kind of where they might need to pick up. So those are a few things that I kind of noted. A few things that really worked for me was creating, I actually think this workshop was fantastic. I mean, I did this a few years ago. The idea of really thinking about, and I think I should probably do this with some of the other classes I teach, you go back and you look at what your course objectives are, what you're trying to get them to do, and how that matches up with your assignments. I mean, that's key. That's what we are doing as instructors, but you can see how that kind of gets lost in some lectures. You're going along, you're like, wait, how is this connected at all to what I'm supposed to be teaching them? You have the big picture idea, but you need to break it down for them. And so I think this workshop really helped me rethink the class that way and really make that link. In addition to this, I also went to Sloan Consortium, kind of runs some hybrid and online for instructors for us to take, and I took 2 of their courses. And that was really excellent because it's basically you evaluating your course. And I found that really helpful for me to be thinking about how I'm doing as the instructor. So a few things that I learned from there and kind of just doing it is really being clear with your expectations and putting that. I actually have a tab. You can label these tabs anything you want. I have a Start Here tab. And I basically just kind of go through, here are the expectations, here's the syllabus. And I actually make them take a syllabus quiz, which I think is a good place to start, especially teaching online in the winter and I assume in the summer. It's such a quick semester. I mean, if you don't know within the first 2 days if you're going to be in this class or not, then you're kind of up a creek, So that's a really useful tool, and I think students really appreciate that. So I've done that with, again, a Start Here tab and then a quiz, and I just test them basically on the syllabus. A couple of the other features that I do like in Blackboard that I think have helped me is the adaptive release, and I don't know if you guys will talk about that, but that's a program that allows you to post your material, and I usually try to post kind of a few weeks, a little bit in advance, but it allows you to post your material, and the student can't have access to the next class folder until they've completed the work in that first class folder, and then in that order to get access to class 3, they need to go to class 2. And I think especially, if you're thinking about teaching online and even hybrid, that keeps them kind of on task. So if you're at week 3 and they are at, they only have class 1 folder open, then they need to reassess where they are in the class. So I think that's been really helpful thing. I think one thing that I do like, both in the hybrid and online format, is collecting everything online. It's a nice kind of paper trail. I collect a lot of the assignments online. Everything's turned in electronically. It's a nice system. They can see that they've submitted stuff. I can see that they have or haven't submitted stuff. It's not like, oh, I put your paper on your desk. Well, you didn't because it's not in the box. So those are some really neat things. As far as the discussion board conversation, I have used discussion board. I still do. I did actually give up the grading rubrics this semester. We'll see how that goes. I did discussion board more as, again, because I'm totally online, there's no chance for discussion. So I try to post something. There was a really neat thing on PBS, did Digital Nation, and about how it's kind of changed us. They did this whole interview with MIT kids and how they're so wired. Are they really paying attention in class? And it was a really good video that I thought they should, think about too themselves. And I had them then post discussions about it. So I think if you come up with, as Chris kind of noted, some interesting way to pull them into a discussion, then that's maybe a good, useful tool for discussion board. Otherwise, I do find that it is kind of, their readings were interesting. I learned a lot. It's how do you kind of pull them into that. And so then I have them, basically, they have to go to discussion board. I have like 5 postings, and they have to post. They get 1 freebie, basically, and then if they don't post, that is like they didn't show up to class. It's kind of like an attendance thing, and they get a percentage points for their attendance that way. So again, first time I've done that this semester, so we'll see what happens. But those are just some things that I kind of have learned. I don't know if there's any questions. Trying to hit on what other people have said and not overwhelm you, because I know you're just starting this process. But again, if I can just kind of say what Chris said, it isn't just a matter of, okay, this I'm just going to sync online. You really do have to think about what am I trying to get them to learn. And a lot of times the lectures that I pulled out to do something with were the ones that were not going well in class. We all know that lecture you leave and you're like, what? Like, they all leave, you're standing there, you're waving, you're dancing, and they're all looking at you. So those are the lectures that I decided, okay, somehow I'm going to try to pull something to make this a learning experience. And a lot of times it was pulling something in online to make it work. So, as Chris did, he went out and studied bugs. I didn't do that, but I found something like, the Digital Nation, that was something that was really relevant to them. We could tie it to the class, and so making that connection, and then they could see it. Questions? I guess not for me.
A few minutes, and we actually still have all 3 people here. I know a couple of them have meetings in class to go to. So questions for either Katie or for Chris or for Sarah? Don't?
So, I guess I'm not doing the hybrid portion of this workshop, but I think a lot of what you talked about can apply even if you're still doing all in class.
Yep.
And I guess my question for all of you was, a lot of the things that you are doing online or more kind of interactively are the way that you would grade them is really very qualitative, I guess, and I'm wondering about the way you communicated criteria for that, and then how those kind of online sort of qualitative exercises and discussions, how big of a portion of the overall class grade is, what makes up the bulk of the course grade.
I do have grading rubrics for my assignments, and I do kind of put the criteria in the syllabus in terms of what my expectation, what I'm wanting them to do, so that that's clear. And then I definitely do have grading rubrics, which I also post in Blackboard, so that they kind of know this is what the grading rubrics based on the syllabus, but those are kind of the expectations that way.
And are they kind of like those, this is what an A paper looks like, blah, blah, blah?
For some of my larger assignments, like I have a big paper that's due, I actually do provide a sample of a good paper and a paper that needs a lot of work. So I do provide samples. I don't do that for every assignment. Sometimes we'll talk about it in class.
What level course is it that you're
It's 200 level. It's an intro level.
So just to say, I post the rubrics online. So this is the description of the assignment, and then the advice of the one I was talking about as an example, since that's the one you saw.
Yep.
And then this is right in the assignment, so they know exactly how I'm going to grade it. And I just go through this, and having a rubric makes grading so much faster.
Yeah.
Especially when I had to do this 210 times. Because there's 70 students and they each gave 3 pieces of advice. So, but this takes me about 3 minutes, so.
Oh, I have one of the new features since we've upgraded Blackboard.
Right, the rubrics are right in there.
Rubric. I haven't used that.
Function.
But there's drop-down boxes.
Sorry, there's one of the new features in Blackboard since we've upgraded is the presence of true rubrics.
Right.
So that you can set up a rubric, so if people are submitting an assignment online, you can actually click the button, pop open your rubric, plop in the grades, and poof, it goes into the grade book.
Yeah. So if you
Does it actually go poop?
Depends on what sound you have set up.
But similar to what Sarah has, I
There
actually.
it is, add
Yeah.
rubric, so if you make a new assignment.
kind of.
Does it have drop-down boxes?
Where is
Because I use the drop-down box.
If in the creating an assignment, so when you make an assignment on Blackboard,
Okay.
then,
I'm sorry, I got a different question, not quite as technical about this. Chris has already answered the question. One of the things I wanted to come here today for was to get a sense of where you made your mistakes, because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. He clearly stated right out that, I tried to just pick this up and move it
Yeah.
over here, and that failed miserably.
Could I just add one thing to Dawn,
Well, yeah,
real quick? I don't get hung up. I hate I'm like, great. So what I do with a lot of these, so I don't know what kind of size assignment you're talking about. When it comes to these little ones, like go online, find something and comment on it. I call that precipitation. I call that participation. Usually it's like, well, 3 to 5 sentences. If I say 3 to 5 sentences and we're in the 5, it's like 0, 1, or 2 points. I'll call that 2. And it's just, I want them to engage, and that's it, done. It's not enough for them to cry about, okay? And basically, everybody gets 2s, or if they don't do it, it's a 0. And if they want to talk about a 1, I'll be like, well, you know what, here's a 2. You did a sentence. And then it's done. That's how I handle it.
I do the same thing in the lab, by the way, it's similar.
But for the
Yeah,
bigger
for the
ones,
bigger assignments.
bigger ones, it's rubric.
Yeah.
But what I was wondering about is that Chris found that there was aspects that really were problematic, and he had to kind of stumble through that. Did you guys find the same thing, that there was aspects of what you planned to do and it just didn't work out? And you turned and did something different?
Yeah.
And what were they?
I've had a lot of success with the nutrition course, so I'm not a great answer for you, I don't have. But a few things I would say, assuming that students know how to use Blackboard is a mistake.
Yes.
Assuming that students know how to submit an assignment on Blackboard. I mean, you ask them. I asked them, do you guys know how to submit an assignment? Raise your hand if you don't. No hands. So
And
I
then
don't
that
show
night
them,
you get 50
and then
emails.
50 of them email you. Well, I couldn't figure out how to submit. Plus, it's easy as pie anyway. You think they could figure it out, but they can't. So just show first class. Just show them how
You
to
ever
do
made a
it.
pie?
I win pie competitions. Do I have any witnesses here that know? I won the biology program pie. Anyway.
Excellent.
So that's one thing, and then the other mistake I would say I've made is that, so what I do is I go through my goal sheets, they have these 2, and I say, well, you guys can figure this stuff out, but boy, it's hard for you to figure out why this is true. So this is what we'll do in class. So that's good, but sometimes when I fall off that, I just sort of, it doesn't match up perfectly, and I end up lecturing about things they could get themselves, and they hate that.
Yes.
Once they get used to the idea that class is only for the interesting, complex things, then they're really mad at you when you're like, and this is ATP. So, when you do it, and go all the way, make them believe that you really are, when you tell them in the first day, you say, I'm saving class time for the interesting, hard, cool things, then you have to do that.
And it's just so I can piggyback on what Sarah said and not get caught up, because there's always that student, and you're like, well, you gotta listen. I did, and you're like, well, why are you asking me this question? So I think that's one.
I always tell them they
Not
can
to
ask
get
me anything on
pulled into it.
They can ask me anything on the goal sheet, and we talk. Obviously, the answers to the goal sheets are not a secret, but I'm not going to spit them out in class. But if you ask me, I'll tell you anything.
Yeah.
So.
A few things that I maybe have struggled with is one, I think, it feels like, and again, I don't know, it even feels like this even in the fall, spring, that they move faster. Like, you need to keep up on the work. You need to have an idea of what you're doing in week 4 at week 1. Because week 1 leads you to week 4. You know what I mean? Like, so there's this whole idea of you have to kind of know this in your head. You have to have a bigger plan, and you have to know how you're going to get there and maybe what content you're going to be delivering in each week. Because I've gotten to week 4 and I'm like, oh crap, I need to deliver week 1 stuff, like I missed something in week 1 and now I wanted them to do stuff week 4, but it built up on itself. And so that's one thing is that when I ran it after like 2 semesters, I knew what I had to put in what order, if that makes sense. to make it run smoothly. And
No,
so
that actually makes really good sense.
that's one
Yes.
thing that really giving yourself that time to process this whole kind of talk today and giving yourself time to process on how you're kind of put it into play and know that first time when you run it, you know how it is, there's always like, oops, that didn't go, that went really well, why? So that was kind of one area, like the stumbling block. And I always felt too, just kind of what Sarah said, like there's stuff that comes up in maybe like discussion board or maybe while I'm grading that I wish I had discovered quicker so that I could jump in it in a class. Like for example, you know, there's a concept that they don't get, they turn in their papers, you read all that, you get that they don't get concept G, and so, but I didn't necessarily have that idea that I should plan to save lecture time to make sure that that got addressed. So a lot of times it was like, you had something else planned and then it was like, okay, but we really need to talk about this because you guys didn't get concept G, and so let's spend a little bit of time. So sometimes that can kind of, for me, and maybe it's just me as the instructor, as the students, they might not have known that there wasn't this smooth flow going on, but for me it was like, oh, I should have addressed that a little, or I should have clarified that with them, or if I had clarified that, I would have known better.
Early, you know, where you could have done some sort of short little exercise along the way to make
Oh,
sure that they
definitely.
were getting.
And that's actually what I started to do. We have this annotated bibliography, you know, summarize, assess journal articles, and they still don't get it. And so we've broken it now down to summarize this article that I'm giving you, assess this article, and I'm able to give them feedback as we go along. So I'm hoping, I haven't read them, they came in on Wednesday night, you know, when I read those papers, they're going to be much better products than the previous classes because this whole idea, it's building on itself, and I feel like I'm teaching the content, but it's not getting, you know, as Chris said, I'm putting my brain in their brains, but they're still not getting it. They're not able to.
A couple more minutes and then we'll take
I
a
don't
quick
know
break and.
If somebody else has a question,
Go ahead.
I'm
Can we get
curious.
access to copies of your syllabus?
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
curious, when we first started doing this, we talked about, yes, getting the lecture out of the class online and the sort of time-shifting, sort of academic TiVo, if you will, where they could do things on their own. I'm curious about a couple of things. Coverage of content. What, if anything, did you feel that you lost? And do the students engage with each other enough that you could trust that they will learn the material on their own and that they will assess each other? So in the nutrition advice, you grade their advice. Do you ever have the students grade the advice?
Well, you talked about that way back when I was designing this last year. You told me that I should do that. And it still could be done, but it's a whole nother layer of grading. And they have a lot of other assignments that go on too. I mean, I have to assess their assessments of each other. They do read the advice that people give them because they have to incorporate that into the next assignment. But I don't have the students evaluate.
I would never presume to tell you anything.
You did, and you were probably right.
I'm just curious, you know, given the relative effort that you all are putting into this, is it worth it? Is it worth it? And how do you evaluate?
We don't do it in the regular. Why would we do
That's a
it?
telling statement.
Don't do what?
I mean, we wouldn't. Well, how would we grade their? We don't have the students evaluate each other during a normal class. How would we do it here?
So the idea is that I have seen at a lot of places that
We could
you
do a lot of
shift-
things.
You shift the responsibility for learning to students.
Right.
Is that just hype, or does it actually happen?
Oh, you know what though? All right, so I've been doing this a long time, you know, and I'll just go ahead and record it if you want to. There are a lot of people out here that are experts in education that will talk all day long about how I should be assessing. And there's lots of things like and I think if you look at the distribution and quality of teaching here at UC, it's a difference between maybe being so good, excellent, and pretty good. We're talking about bouncing up and down, up here. And, you know, I think what we're talking about is fudging. There's lots of things. And I think what you're talking about there is some serious thinking about what really goes into, what does it mean when students start evaluating? I don't know what that is. I really don't.
Well, actually, John, I thought I particular comment slightly different. Did you think the effort that they're putting in for what they're doing in the hybridization and so forth, is it worth it? Are they getting out of it what they thought they would get out of it from the teaching side? Are the students learning more? Was it worth it to you, for you? I may be wrong. Was it worth it for you guys to do this, to convert it over to hybrid, and are you getting out of it what you expected?
Is that what you meant?
Well, Chris, we should catch up for lunch sometime. things have definitely changed, since we had first started. But and you're perfectly fine to, if you don't are skeptical of that notion, that's fine. But
I don't know what you mean.
well, can students learn from each other?
Yes.
Is that something that we want to facilitate in terms
Yes.
of peer instruction, peer learning,
We certainly
student
do that with
engagement?
like.
Is there an element of student engagement? And how do you keep that particularly in an online?
No, I think what you were talking about is how do you measure.
Well, that is the worth question. Yes.
I don't know how you measure that, and I don't know how you quantify.
Well, relative to your effort that you put into previous, and if it's anecdotal or instinctual, is it?
No, I think facilitating interaction. But I do think. But with a hybrid course, what I think the way to do it is what I reflected on is move the material that is sort of like depositional material out of my brain into theirs somewhere else so that I can move their interaction to the classroom. That's what I wanted to do.
Do you think that the students
I would say that's I agree, yeah.
I wholeheartedly
are the students interacting with each other as much in your hybrid class as they normally would in your face-to-face class?
More.
They're interacting more.
More, because I don't stand there saying, this is vitamin C and this is vitamin D, because they learn that outside of class and then
And
in
then
class.
there's more time.
That's where the
Right.
advantage of the
And-
hybrid is.
And
that
do
they
you
can
feel
do
that they're
more with the
learning
hybrid.
the same material based on, I don't know, common exams from before and after, or not, or whatever? Do you think that you're covering overall, maybe it's not you personally saying those words, but
I have the exact same
coverage.
goal sheet, so I make all my assessments from the goal sheets. And
The exams
for
have
each
to be
chapter,
materials.
so I have the same goal sheets that I had before and after hybridization. And the distribution of grades, I would say it's probably was a slightly better after hybridization, but it was basically the same. So given the same goals and the same assessments, I don't know, I'd say the tests are probably a little harder, but they did at least as well, maybe better in the hybrid version than they.
Let me follow up on this if I may, though, because some of the folks that are still here at lunch weren't actively deciding to hybridize. But couldn't you still, even if you were going to teach a class totally
Yeah.
face-to-face,
Yeah.
couldn't you incorporate a lot of the elements
Yes.
that you have as hybridized? I mean, would you go back to lecturing just special?
No, I mean, so I mentioned a bit ago that I teach this other class, anatomy and physiology, and it's completely face-to-face. It's all the regular amount of class time. I don't lecture at all. And I have them do the boring stuff out of class, and then class we do awesome things. The students even say it's awesome. Just read the blue sheets. They liked it again. So that absolutely, I agree. If you're not hybridizing at all, it's still a good idea to think about what you really want to do with that precious class time.
And for me, it was like, if you're not hybridizing at all, and I told this to a couple of my colleagues, so our department was totally not on, I think some other departments mentioned this, we're not bit by the technology bug until just last year, a couple years ago. And so they were not into social workers. We meet face to face. We don't meet, online. That's not okay. And so this whole idea of now I have a couple people who are doing some things kind of online or drawing from online stuff, even though it's a face-to-face class, and I think that just adds to the class. And for me, I picked, there's always those 2 or 3 classes of material that are just not getting through. And so I tended to pick those that we were struggling with and going and finding some sort of something to pull in, whether it was technology or something, to make it a better class. Because whatever I was doing wasn't working. Because after like 15 minutes, it was a lot of glazed eyes.
I think that was my point with my ecology class. Being away from teaching it for like a year and then coming back and teaching it this past fall. Going in there and being like, looking at them, they seemed uncomfortable, and I was uncomfortable, and it was just uncomfortable.
And you've gone back to face-to-face.
And it was face-to-face,
All
and,
face-to-face.
well, doing it hybrid was uncomfortable, and I was just, it's like wearing dress clothes, and it just didn't like it, and And so now, I mean, I don't want to call it a hybrid course. It's just I'm going to introduce diverse ways of going about teaching, more diverse ways of going about teaching, which are going to involve some hybrid techniques in order to have more interactive type stuff going on in the classroom. And that's just, I mean, call it hybrid if you want to. It's just going to be, they're going to have to go do other things so that I can take precious class time in order to get them to interact and do other stuff next time. And if it's a hybrid course, we'll call it a hybrid course or not. I'm just going to lean on Blackboard is what I'm going to do. And it's going to be better. And I'm going to feel better about it. I don't think I'm going to have it in the morning. But I can tell you with the blue sheets, the blue sheets are really informative when it comes to it's too bad to look at it, but I can tell you that that Scantron aren't as. When I asked them to specifically comment, I'm like, okay, so how did you like the new online textbook? They all wrote about the new online.
So my tip would be really to just even, again, if Linda mentioned you're not converting your whole class, just to try something this spring semester or summer or winter or, fall, whenever you're teaching. Just try, one thing. I think that's the way to go. And I forgot to mention, and Sarah had noted that they don't know how to turn in an assignment and they don't know how Blackboard works. So I actually did not review it in class, but I posted 2 Jing videos on how to do it, and that's in that Start Here tab. Review these 2 videos. This is basically the crux. You need to know how to do this stuff. So that was 2 things I did.
One of the colleagues I have who was in that workshop too, Cynthia, she sends a Jing that says, this is how to submit an assignment, this is where your stuff is, whatever, and then you show screenshots of different Blackboard things.
Because that's like lecture time too.
Can I just piggyback on that right there as, the person who deals with summer and winter? Get that out to the students before the start of the term. I mean, anytime you're teaching, ideally any class, but especially a hybrid or online, if you can let the students know in advance of the start of the term what to expect and drive them to Blackboard and how to do those things, I think that's really what the students need to know before that class.
Right, and I do that Start Here tab, and I tell them to actually review it before the first day of classes because I say to them, if you want to drop this class, then you don't want to lose your money, and that's what I literally say to them. If you want to drop this class and not lose your money, then you should do this before classes start. Because I know once classes start, then you start losing
Once
the
class
money.
starts, the money
starts.
is like this through the week, and by the end of the week, they're out their tuition. True.
Okay, one last question, and then we're actually a little behind schedule, so I'm going to call it a draw, and we'll transition into the afternoon.
This is my 3rd hybrid workshop, and my web pages, I hope it's the reason, are so good that my average attendance in lecture is well below 50%.
That's good.
If you hybridize, you have to give them a reason to come to lecture if you want them to come, definitely. I found that as well. Also, my class is what the students consider to be early, 10 a.m. So, got to give them a reason to come then.
All right, well, thanks very much. So we'll take just a couple of minutes before the folks that have signed up for the afternoon session. We're going to reconvene in here, and I'm going to get you started on your next exercise.
How many openings do you have?